If you're new here, hit that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another tale of humanity defying the impossible. Now let's dive in. The ruins were quiet in the way only a battlefield could be, silent, yet soaked in echoes. Smoke curled from shattered armor plating and the air carried the copper sting of blood mixed with scorched stone. Dr. Marcus Hale picked his way through the wreckage, boots crunching glassy shards, his gloved hands steady despite the tremors still rattling the ground. He wasn't supposed to be here. Medics belonged in triage tents, patching soldiers in neat rows, but the Dominion's assault had turned order into chaos. What was once a human-forward base was now a graveyard. He shouldered his pack, scanning the wreckage with a precision that came from habit, not nerves. Every overturned slab, every broken husk of transport, could conceal a breath, a pulse, a chance. A low growl drifted at his side. Brack moved like a shadow among the debris, claws raking sparks across steel. The beast's body was compact muscle wrapped in a dark pelt that gleamed under the alien moonlight, its eyes an amber fire. To anyone else, Brack was a nightmare from the old forests of Earth's myth, a predator caught between Wolverine and Nightmare Hound. To Marcus he was simply Brack, partner and guardian, never more than a step away. Marcus crouched beside a toppled barricade, pressing 2 fingers against the throat of a wounded Marine. Nothing. He exhaled, lips tightening, then shifted to the next. This one stirred, eyes fluttering. "Easy," Marcus murmured, already unrolling bandages. His voice carried the calm of a man who had spoken those words 100 times under fire. "You're not done yet. Not while I'm here." Brack circled the perimeter, hackles raised. The predator's ears twitched at distant movement Marcus hadn't yet caught. His loyalty was absolute. Where Marcus knelt to heal, Brack stood to kill. The sound came, metal scraping. Marcus tensed. A ripple of heat shimmered at the far end of the rubble. Too precise to be collapsing wreckage. Too deliberate. He tightened the dressing on the soldier's wound, shoved a stim into the man's arm, then rose slowly. Figures emerged, cloaked in armor that glinted green and black, Karzek Dominion raiders. They carried weapons shaped like jagged bones, energy humming at the tips. Their visors reflected the dying flames. One stepped forward, tall, voice distorted by a rebreather. "Human medic. Drop your kit. Hands above your head." Marcus's jaw set. "I don't carry weapons. That's what makes you easy prey." The alien's mandibles clicked. Behind him the others fanned out, circling. Brack growled low, body coiled like a spring. The raiders' weapons turned toward him. Marcus lifted a hand, steady, quieting his companion without words. Brack's eyes flicked to him, the predator's muscles trembling with restrained violence. "I'm not leaving the wounded," Marcus said. His tone was flat, not defiant, but firm enough to draw a hiss of irritation from the lead raider. "You'll leave them or you'll leave in pieces." The order cracked like a whip. For a moment, silence stretched. Marcus weighed the options with grim clarity. He wasn't a fighter. He couldn't outgun them, couldn't outrun them with the soldier still bleeding out at his feet. But neither would he beg. He had learned long ago that dignity was as vital as air. The raiders moved as one. 2 seized Marcus, wrenching his arms behind him, while another drove a shock prod into Brack's side. The predator erupted in fury, a blur of claws and teeth. One raider's scream was cut short as Brack ripped into him, tearing armor like cloth. Energy fire lanced across the clearing, but Brack's momentum was feral, unstoppable. Marcus struggled in his captor's grip, shouting, "No! Brack, enough!" His voice cut through the chaos like a command forged in steel. Brack hesitated, blood dripping from his jaws, but another prod stabbed into him. Electricity crackled through his frame. He snarled, convulsed, and 3 raiders piled onto him with restraint coils. The beast thrashed, tore one free, but the numbers and the current were too much. With a final, guttural roar, Brack was driven to the ground, muscles spasming. Marcus's throat tightened. He had seen comrades fall, seen machines burn, but never had he seen Brack forced down. The raiders bound him in chains designed for war beasts, dragging his bulk toward a transport skimmer. The leader turned back to Marcus, mandibles clicking in amusement. "Strange. We spent years trying to tame those predators. They bow to no master. Yet this one follows you. The Dominion will enjoy studying why." Marcus's response was quiet, but it cut sharper than defiance. "Because loyalty can't be engineered." The alien struck him across the face, a flash of pain blooming behind his eyes. Blood welled at the corner of his lip. "Take him," the leader ordered. They dragged Marcus to the skimmer, forcing him beside Brack's chained body. The predator's eyes, glazed with fury and pain, still found Marcus. There was no fear there. Only trust, battered but unbroken. The engines ignited, lifting them off the scorched battlefield. The ruins fell away beneath, a graveyard of men and machines swallowed by smoke. Marcus sat shackled, heartbeat steady despite the ache in his chest. He looked once at the soldier he had tried to save, lying still amid the wreckage. Another weight on a heart already scarred with too many. He lowered his head, whispering under his breath where only Brack could hear. They think they can break us. Let them try. The transport disappeared into the clouds, carrying man and beast into the jaws of captivity. The Dominion believed they had captured prey. In truth, they had only set the stage for their own undoing. The Dominion ship hummed with a cold rhythm, a mechanical heartbeat pulsing through its steel bones. Marcus sat shackled to a wall, wrists locked behind him, chains rattling with every shift. The air reeked of antiseptic layered over rust, a smell designed to announce the place as sterile, but beneath it clung something raw, the copper tang of blood, the acrid bite of fear. The raiders had delivered him to their fortress lab orbiting a dead, crater-pocked world, and he was already cataloging its cruelty without meaning to. He counted the bruises on his ribs, the dryness in his throat, the heavy press of exhaustion clawing at his eyelids. None of it mattered. What mattered was the sound that came from beyond the wall, Brack's restrained growl, muffled by thick plating but alive, defiant. They had chained the predator in another cell, drugged, bound but not silenced. That guttural vibration carried more comfort than warmth or water. The cell door hissed open. A Dominion officer entered, tall and broad, his carapace armor gleaming like obsidian. Mandibles flared as he studied Marcus with the dissectional interest of a butcher weighing cuts of meat. In one clawed hand he held a slate etched with alien symbols, in the other a needle-thin instrument that pulsed faintly with blue light. "You are a healer," the officer rasped. His translator shaped the alien tones into jagged words. "We know this. We know you mend flesh, restore broken bodies, extend lives that should have ended. Tell me, human, why waste skill on the weak?" Marcus's mouth was dry but his voice came even. "Because they're not weak. They're alive." The officer tilted his head, clicking in amusement. "Noble words. Fragile philosophy. Here we prize strength. Pain teaches strength. Death weeds out the useless. But your skills could be useful. You could teach us to save our warriors so they fight longer, kill more. Serve us and your suffering ends." Marcus closed his eyes briefly, inhaled the sterile stench. When he opened them, he met the officer's gaze with the calm of a man who had stitched arteries on a field shaking with artillery. "No." The word landed like stone. The officer leaned closer, mandibles brushing the air near Marcus's cheek. "You refuse quickly. I admire defiance, it gives the breaking more flavor." He jabbed the instrument into Marcus's arm. A hot wave of electricity tore through muscle and bone, wringing a cry from him before he clenched his jaw shut. The officer's laugh was a low rattle. "We will make you teach us. Everyone does in time." They left him bound, body shivering from aftershocks, mind spinning. He pressed his forehead against the cool wall, forcing his breath into rhythm. Pain could not be allowed to become a master. Pain was just a signal, nothing more. He repeated that until the tremor in his chest slowed. Hours or maybe days blurred in the fortress. They withheld food, let water drip just enough to keep him conscious. They tried voices instead of blades, soft whispers through speakers, promising comfort, freedom, even reunion with Brack if he cooperated. He answered silence with silence. But it wasn't only his will being tested. Through the wall he heard the predator's roars, at first steady and furious, then weaker, punctuated by crackling shocks. They tormented Brack too, dragging the beast into their games. He imagined them trying to force obedience, trying to bend what had never bowed. He clenched his fists until the shackles bit into his skin. One night, if time could be called that here, they dragged Marcus into a wide chamber lit by cold blue lamps. The floor was polished metal, easy to wash clean. At the center lay 3 humans, prisoners in tattered uniforms, breathing shallow, bodies trembling. The officer gestured toward them. "Prove your loyalty. Heal them and they return to their cells. Refuse and we end them." Marcus knelt before the first soldier without hesitation. He tore strips from his own uniform to bind wounds, pressed pressure where blood welled, whispered words of steadiness into ears clouded with delirium. His captors watched in silence, some sneering, some curious. He moved to the next, then the next, until each drew steadier breaths. His hands shook with exhaustion, but his focus never wavered. When he was finished, the officer tilted his head. Strange creature. You do not break. You do not bargain. But everything bends, healer. We have sharper tools still. They dragged him back to his cell. Brack's roar shook the walls minutes later, followed by a sound Marcus had never heard from him before, a choking yelp. Rage surged through Marcus, pure and untempered. His chains rattled as he pulled against them until his wrists bled. The door opened again. 2 guards hauled him into a corridor lined with shimmering barriers. At the end stood a chamber larger than any he had seen, tiered with balconies where armored figures gathered to watch. The officer waited at the center, mandibles spread in anticipation. A platform descended. Brack was hauled into the chamber, chains clattering, muscles twitching with drugged weakness. His amber eyes found Marcus instantly. Even dulled, even bound, there was recognition, trust that pierced the haze. The officer raised his claws, voice amplified. We will end your stubbornness, human. Watch as your beast is destroyed before your eyes. Hear his cries. Know his pain. This is how loyalty dies. The crowd hissed approval, weapons striking against railing. Brack snarled, pulling against chains that dug into his flesh, blood streaking the floor. Marcus's throat tightened, but he lifted his chin. He would not give them despair. He would not let them see fear. Do it then, Marcus said, voice raw but steady. But understand, if you kill him you'll never learn what you wanted. You'll never understand why he follows me and not you. The officer's mandibles clicked in frustration at the defiance, but he signaled the guards. The chains were released, Brack shoved forward, unsteady on weakened limbs. The beast shook, teeth bared, eyes never leaving Marcus. The officer gestured. Kill him. Let him see his failure. Brack staggered, then took one slow step toward Marcus. The crowd leaned forward, eager for blood. Marcus stood tall, heart hammering, every instinct screaming, but his eyes never wavered. The predator's growl rumbled low, torn between instinct and bond. Another step. The gap closed. Soldiers shouted, claws rattled on railing. Brack halted inches away, nostrils flaring. Then instead of striking he lowered his massive head, pressing it against Marcus's chest with a sound that was not rage but fierce, guttural devotion. The chamber erupted in chaos. Guards shouted, weapons snapped up, but the predator had chosen. He had not broken. He had not bowed. He had returned. Marcus lifted a bloodied hand, resting it against Brack's skull, whispering words that only the beast would hear. The officer's mandibles snapped shut, rage vibrating through the chamber. Then both of you will die together. The command rang out and the guards surged forward, weapons ready. The guards closed in, armored boots pounding against the floor, their weapons spitting arcs of light that seared the air. Brack shifted instantly, muscles bunching beneath his matted pelt, his growl resonating like thunder in a storm. He lunged, not at Marcus, but at the first alien soldier who dared to raise a blade toward him. The impact was savage. Claws slashed, teeth tore through armor, and blood splattered across the polished metal floor. The predator's fury was unchained. Marcus stumbled back, chains still dangling from his wrists, eyes wide but not with fear, with calculation. Every movement Brack made was wild yet precise, a storm that followed instinct sharpened by loyalty. But Marcus saw more than chaos. He saw opportunities, weak points, vulnerabilities in anatomy he had studied under dim lamps in field hospitals, alien physiology mapped out in memory because knowledge was the one weapon he carried. Behind the joint, he shouted, voice raw. Brack twisted, jaws closing around a guard's knee, crushing the plates until bones snapped like brittle wood. Another guard screamed, his arm torn free. The spectators on the balconies above shrieked in shock and anger, some pounding on the rails, others scrambling away as their controlled spectacle spiraled into carnage. The Dominion officer barked orders, his mandibles clattering furiously, but the chain of command collapsed in the frenzy. Brack was no beast to be caged now. He was vengeance made flesh and Marcus was his anchor. A shot grazed Marcus's shoulder, burning cloth and skin. He staggered but didn't fall. He snatched up the fallen weapon of a dead guard, fumbling with its alien grip, then fired at a console across the chamber. Sparks erupted, lights flickered, and one of the containment fields failed with a groan. From the adjoining cells, other prisoners, gaunt humans, scarred aliens who had been forced into chains, stared in stunned disbelief as the barrier dissolved. Move! Marcus roared, voice carrying the same authority he used to command triage under fire. Now! The prisoners surged forward, desperation feeding strength. They seized weapons dropped in panic, joining the chaos. Brack tore through the Dominion ranks like a blade through cloth, his fur streaked with blood not his own. Marcus pushed forward, every step a battle against exhaustion and pain, but his focus never faltered. A guard lunged at him with a serrated blade, and Marcus ducked, driving the butt of his stolen weapon into the alien's throat. He had no soldier's grace, no killer's instinct, but he knew the anatomy, where cartilage collapsed, where veins swelled close to the skin. The alien dropped, gasping, and Marcus pressed on, dragging another freed prisoner toward cover. The arena floor became a slaughterhouse. Dominion guards fell one after another, their discipline shattered by the predator that refused their chains and the human who refused despair. For the first time, Marcus glimpsed fear in the officer's eyes. Not fear of the beast alone, but of the bond they had tried to sever and failed to comprehend. Brack leapt onto a balcony, scattering armored figures like brittle toys. He dragged one down with him, landing in a spray of sparks and torn flesh. His eyes burned, glowing in the dim, fixed always on Marcus. Every strike, every kill, circled back to the medic who had been his anchor since the day they first crossed paths. The Dominion officer rallied a knot of guards at the far end of the chamber. He raised his claw, voice booming through amplifiers. "Contain them. Kill the beast. Leave the human alive. His will must shatter before he dies." The order barely left his mandibles before Brack barreled through the line, scattering guards like straw. Marcus followed in his wake, gathering the freed prisoners behind him. He shouted instructions: where to strike, how to wound without wasting strength, his medical mind weaponized in the service of survival. As they reached the far doors, alarms shrieked throughout the fortress. Red lights strobed across the chamber, painting the carnage in pulses of blood. The floor trembled beneath them, signaling reinforcements on the way. Marcus's breath came in ragged bursts, but his eyes blazed with the clarity of a man who had found something stronger than fear. They burst into a corridor, Brack dragging chains still clamped around his limbs. His movements were slowed but not weakened. Every step radiated fury. Marcus pressed a hand briefly to the predator's flank, whispering gratitude even as he urged him forward. The prisoners stumbled after them, wide-eyed, clinging to the human who had turned a hopeless execution into a revolution. Behind them, the officer's voice thundered, promising vengeance, swearing their deaths would feed Dominion glory. But Marcus barely heard it. He could already feel the fortress turning against its masters. Systems cracking under sabotage, prisoners igniting rebellion cell by cell. They raced through the maze of sterile halls, weapons scavenged from the fallen, Brack tearing through any guard who blocked their path. Marcus paused only to shove a stim into a staggering prisoner's arm, or to bind a bleeding wound with a strip torn from his own shirt. Even in flight he could not stop being what he was, a medic preserving life in the middle of chaos. At last they reached a wide chamber lined with humming machinery. Consoles flickered, streams of data cascading across alien displays. A map of the fortress glowed faintly, revealing corridors, barracks, armories. Marcus scanned it, mind working even as sweat streaked his dirted face. They were deep inside enemy territory. Escape would be near impossible. But escape was not his only thought. The Dominion had brought him here to break him, to use his knowledge as a weapon. Instead, he could use their fortress against them. He could keep his people alive, not by running but by turning this place into their battlefield. Brack paced beside him, chains dragging sparks against the floor, his breath heavy but eyes sharp. The predator pressed his head briefly against Marcus's shoulder, a fleeting touch that grounded them both. Marcus looked around at the faces of those who had followed him, some terrified, some hardened, all clinging to the impossible hope that had been lit in the arena. His voice, hoarse but firm, carried through the chamber. "We hold here. We turn their own fortress into their grave. They think we're prey. Let's prove them wrong." The prisoners tightened their grips on stolen weapons. Brack let out a roar that shook the walls. Beyond the sealed doors, the sound of marching boots grew louder, a tide of soldiers closing in. The Dominion had not yet realized the true danger. They still believed they were fighting one medic and one beast. They had no idea they were about to face something far worse, a bond that would not break and a will that refused to bow. The doors shuddered as the first strike from outside landed. Marcus exhaled once, steadying himself. Then he raised the weapon in his hands, Brack crouched at his side, and the prisoners braced for the storm. The next wave was coming. And this time, the human and his predator would meet it on their terms. The fortress groaned under the weight of alarms. Sirens howled, lights strobed, and the metallic corridors seemed to close in with every passing second. Marcus gripped the alien rifle tighter, its stock awkward in his hands, but he refused to let uncertainty show. Around him, the rescued prisoners looked to him for direction. Fear etched deep lines into their faces, yet their eyes held the flicker of something dangerous, hope. Brack prowled beside him, chains dragging sparks across the floor, fur bristling as his ears swiveled to catch the rhythm of approaching boots. The predator's amber eyes burned like molten metal in the crimson light. Every twitch of muscle promised violence, and yet the beast waited for Marcus's word. That was the secret the Dominion could not understand. Control did not come from domination but from trust. The doors shuddered as the first blast landed, steel groaning under the force. Marcus scanned the chamber quickly. Medical consoles lined one wall, sleek alien machinery meant for healing or experimentation. Vats filled with luminescent fluid hummed faintly, and racks of surgical instruments glinted beneath sterile lamps. What had been built as a place of control could become a fortress of defiance. He pointed to the prisoners. Barricade the entrances. Turn over the tables, drag the consoles. Anything heavy becomes cover. Move. They obeyed, driven less by authority than by the clarity in his tone. He moved with them, pushing his own weight against the console until it screeched across the floor. Brack joined, slamming his bulk into the metal with a grunt that sent it skidding into place. The room transformed into a stronghold, crude but functional, every object turned toward survival. The doors cracked again, sparks showering the barricade. Marcus's pulse hammered, but his focus narrowed. He tore a medkit from the wall, scanning its alien vials. Most were incomprehensible, but he understood enough. Pain suppressors, adrenaline stimulants, clotting agents. Tools meant for healing could be sharpened into weapons if wielded with precision. He jabbed a stimulant into a soldier slumped nearby, watching color flood back into his gaunt face. The man blinked, strength seeping into his limbs. "Get ready," Marcus said, handing him a scavenged weapon. "Aim low. Arteries, joints. Don't waste strength on armor." The man nodded, jaw tightening with renewed resolve. The barricade exploded inward. A flood of Dominion soldiers stormed through, armored, disciplined, their weapons hissing with energy. For a breath, the air froze, and then Brack launched forward, a blur of claws and teeth. He tore the first soldier down, ripping through armor as if it were paper, his roar shaking the chamber. "Fire!" Marcus shouted. The prisoners unleashed a storm of stolen energy bolts. The confined space amplified the chaos, blinding flashes, deafening screams, the acrid stench of charred flesh. Marcus moved among them, not as a warrior but as a conductor, directing the rhythm of survival. He pointed where to shoot, when to fall back, when to surge forward. A soldier broke through the line, swinging a serrated blade toward a prisoner. Marcus didn't hesitate. He stepped in, jamming a syringe into the alien's exposed neck. The fluid hissed into the bloodstream and the soldier convulsed, collapsing with a strangled cry. Marcus wrenched the blade free and shoved it into the hands of the nearest ally. The Dominion forces pressed harder, wave after wave. The room became a crucible, forged in blood and grit. Marcus patched wounds mid-battle, hands steady even as bolts scorched past his head. He tore strips from his shirt, bound arteries, injected stimulants, then shoved the wounded back into the fight. His oath as a medic was not broken, it was weaponized. Every life he saved struck another blow against the enemy. Brack moved like a storm unchained. He leapt from barricade to barricade, dragging soldiers down with primal ferocity. His chains swung like whips, battering skulls, tearing weapons from claws. The Dominion had wanted to see a beast break under command. Instead they saw him rise as a nightmare that answered only to a human's voice. But the tide did not falter. For every soldier Brack felled, two more pressed in. The Dominion officer appeared at the threshold, towering above his troops, mandibles snapping in rage. His armor gleamed with embedded weapons, his bulk dwarfing the rest. He raised a massive energy blade, its edge glowing crimson. His voice thundered across the chamber. "Enough games. You will not leave here alive. Beast, human, you both end tonight." The soldiers fell back at his gesture, giving him space. The chamber quieted, filled only with the hum of weapons and the ragged breaths of the prisoners. Marcus's heart pounded, but he met the officer's gaze without flinching. He had expected this, an inevitable clash with the embodiment of Dominion cruelty. Brack crouched, growl vibrating the floor. His eyes locked on the towering figure, teeth bared. He was battered, bloodied, but unbroken. Marcus rested a hand briefly on the predator's flank, whispering under the storm of his breath. "We hold the line together." The officer advanced, each step heavy, the crimson blade cutting arcs of light through the air. He pointed it at Marcus. "You are no warrior. You are prey hiding behind beasts and scraps. When you die, your legend dies with you. Marcus lifted his weapon, steady despite the ache in his arms. Legends aren't mine to keep. They're theirs. He nodded toward the prisoners who stood behind him, gripping their rifles, faces hardened with resolve. And Brax, kill me and you'll still never erase that. The officer roared, lunging forward. Brax surged to meet him, claws clashing with blade, sparks cascading as steel and fury collided. The predator slammed into the giant, driving him back a step, but the officer's blade cut deep across Brax's shoulder. Blood sprayed and Marcus's chest clenched. He didn't hesitate. He darted forward, ducking beneath a swing and drove the stolen syringe into the officer's exposed joint. The fluid hissed, muscles seizing for a split second, enough for Brax to twist free and slam his weight against the alien's chest. The officer stumbled, but he did not fall. The battle between Predator and Warlord filled the chamber, every clash shaking the walls, every strike echoing like thunder. Marcus scrambled among the wreckage, dragging a wounded prisoner to cover, shouting orders, firing bursts into the Dominion ranks trying to press forward. He was everywhere at once, healer, fighter, leader. The prisoners fought with renewed ferocity, their courage bolstered by the sight of Marcus standing unyielding and Brax tearing into their captors. What had begun as desperation became resistance, and resistance was hardening into defiance. The officer struck again, blade arcing toward Brax's throat. Marcus's heart lurched as he saw the predator falter, blood slicking his fur. He darted forward, pressing his hands to Brax's wound, sealing flesh with a patch from the medkit even as battle raged around them. "Stay with me," he whispered fiercely. "We're not done yet." Brax snarled, rising again, fury reignited by the touch of the only being he trusted. The officer's mandibles clattered in frustration. He had expected to break the human spirit by wounding the beast, but instead he had only fed the fire. The clash surged again, each strike carrying the weight of survival. Marcus watched with unyielding focus, his mind already racing with possibilities, every weakness in the officer's form catalogued. He knew anatomy. He knew where this alien bled, where joints failed, where lungs struggled. Knowledge was his weapon, and he would wield it until either he or his enemy fell. The battle roared on, unresolved, as alarms blared and the fortress trembled with the chaos spreading through its halls. The outcome hung on the edge of a blade, waiting to be claimed. The clash between Predator and Warlord thundered through the chamber like a storm made flesh. Sparks showered the barricades as Brax's claws raked against the officer's crimson blade, the screech of steel against steel filling the air with a primal music. Each strike carved deep gouges into the walls, a testament to their ferocity. Yet neither yielded ground. Brax bled freely, crimson staining his mottled fur, but the Predator's movements carried a savage rhythm, each lunge driven by loyalty more than instinct. Across from him, the officer's hulking frame radiated power, every motion calculated, every strike meant not just to kill but to dominate. Marcus moved like a shadow between them and the chaos spilling from the corridor. Prisoners fought tooth and nail against the Dominion soldiers, their fear transmuted into something sharper under his command. He bound wounds, barked orders, returned fire when gaps appeared in their line, and still his eyes never strayed far from Brax. He could not allow the beast to fall, not here, not now, when every breath the Predator drew was proof that loyalty could outmatch chains. The officer slammed his blade downward, a crimson arc of death, but Brax caught it in both clawed hands, muscles straining, chains sparking as they tightened under the pressure. For a heartbeat, the Predator held the impossible, jaws snapping inches from the officer's face. Marcus seized the opening. He hurled a metal shard scavenged from the wreckage, aiming not for the officer's armored chest but for the seam at the base of his mandible. It struck true, embedding with a crack of chitin. The officer staggered, mandibles flaring in pain, his grip faltering. Brax roared and drove his weight forward, slamming the Warlord into the barricade. The structure shattered beneath their combined mass, consoles and alien instruments scattering across the floor. The prisoners shouted, their voices rising like a tide, pushing back the Dominion forces with newfound vigor. But the officer was not so easily undone. With a surge of brute strength, he threw Brax aside, sending the Predator crashing into the medical consoles. The impact rattled the room and for an instant Brax did not rise. The sight tore at Marcus's chest. The beast that had carried them this far lay still, chains slack, breath ragged. The officer turned his blade toward Marcus. His mandibles clacked in triumph, blood oozing from the crack Marcus had inflicted yet failing to slow him. "Without your beast you are nothing. Alone you are prey." Marcus stood tall, though exhaustion burned in every muscle. He leveled his weapon, hand steady. "You keep calling me prey," he said, voice quiet but sharp. "And yet you bleed every time I touch you." The officer lunged, blade raised to cleave him in two. Marcus sidestepped, faster than the alien expected, jabbing another syringe into the warlord's exposed limb. This one carried a coagulant, meant to seal wounds, but forced into the bloodstream it turned blood to sludge. The officer roared, swiping wildly, slowed by the sudden weight dragging his movements. Brack stirred, pulling himself upright with a guttural snarl. Marcus met the predator's eyes across the wreckage, the wordless bond flaring between them. No command was spoken, yet understanding passed like lightning. This was the moment. The officer staggered, mandibles clattering in fury, blade dragging arcs of light across the walls. Brack lunged, chains whipping through the air as he struck with every ounce of strength left in his body. He clamped onto the officer's arm, claws sinking deep, and wrenched it aside. The crimson blade crashed into the floor, sparking against steel. Marcus moved with him, darting beneath the predator's bulk. He slammed the scavenged blade he carried upward, driving it through the gap in the officer's armor, straight into the heart beneath the chitin. The warlord froze, mandibles locking in a silent scream, his body trembling with the shock of betrayal by anatomy itself. Brack twisted, snapping the officer's blade arm free with a sickening crack. The warlord collapsed, crashing to the floor, his massive frame shaking the chamber. Marcus wrenched his weapon free, chest heaving, as the officer's life bled out into the sterile tiles. For a long moment, silence reigned, broken only by the hum of failing lights. Then the Dominion soldiers faltered, their discipline unraveling as the sight of their fallen commander sank in. The prisoners surged forward, pressing their advantage, their fury unleashed in a tide that the remnants of the garrison could not withstand. The chamber filled with the sound of retreating boots, shouts of panic in alien tongues, and the crackle of weapons fire chasing them into the corridors beyond. The fortress, once a monument to Dominion power, now shook with rebellion. Marcus lowered his weapon, legs trembling beneath him. He turned to Brack, who swayed on his feet, blood matting his fur. The predator's chest heaved, but his eyes were alive, burning with the feral pride of victory. Marcus pressed his forehead briefly against the beast's, a gesture born of exhaustion and gratitude. "You didn't just survive," he whispered. "You proved them wrong." The prisoners gathered, their eyes fixed on Marcus and the predator at his side. In their faces he saw more than relief. He saw belief. Belief that a medic and a beast, bound not by chains but by trust, could topple the unbreakable. One of the freed men stepped forward, voice raw. "What now?" "The fortress is in chaos. The Dominion will come again." Marcus straightened, exhaustion still gnawing at him, but resolve hardening his voice. "Then we hold until the galaxy hears what happened here. They wanted to break a medic. Instead we broke their chains. That story will spread faster than any army." Brack growled low as if echoing his words. Around them the prisoners nodded, their fear burned away in the fire of what they had just endured. They were no longer captives. They were witnesses to defiance. The alarms finally fell silent, their echoes fading into the charged stillness of victory. The fortress smelled of ozone, blood, and smoke, a monument to survival carved in chaos. Marcus stood among it all, one hand resting on Brack's battered shoulder, the other holding a weapon that felt heavier than its weight. He did not know what lay beyond the fortress walls, whether reinforcements would come or whether the Dominion would try to bury this truth under fire and silence. But he knew one thing with certainty: they had seen the unbreakable break, and that could never be undone. Brack lifted his head, letting out a roar that shook the chamber, a sound not of rage but of triumph. It carried through the corridors out into the night, a proclamation to any who listened. The beast had chosen, and his choice had shattered an empire's lie. Marcus met the predator's gaze, his voice rough but steady. "Let them come. We're not prey anymore." The fortress burned with the promise of rebellion, and in its heart stood a medic and his predator, bound together by the simple, unstoppable defiance of refusing to be broken.